Oh, for God's sakes, I hate it when it does this. I'm not prepared for it to be over there. I want the screen over here. Okay, guys, so I ended really weak on, God, I can't even think. Well, chapter 15, I ended really weak on pre and post magnification, or read and write magnification. Part of it was like the wording kind of got to me. Part of it I didn't prepare well enough, but I do understand it. It's just, man, I had a weak display there. So let me pull this off to the, well, let's share my screen. And we're just going to start over from there. And then we have a whole bunch of new concepts to bring in. So that is that. So, okay. Just in a nutshell, I'm not going to go over the whole thing again. I think it was pretty painful to end out. I'm sorry about that. But in a nutshell, if you're going to read, magnify, in other words, magnification after the picture is taken. The book's already written. Now you're going to read it, and you're going to bring out your magnifying glass and read it closer. Think of it like that. And so if we have our original screen here as the whole screen, our whole image, really, the whole saved image, and then we zoom in after the fact, zoom or magnify, then we can take these pixels, the information in those pixels. That's what got me the other day, I guess yesterday, technically. To talk about the pixels, it's the same number. Well, no, it's not this. If you're talking about the screen has a certain amount of pixels, and there's a certain amount of pixels of memory. So that's what gets a little confusing. He's using the term pixel as a form of memory, and it's actually not. It's not entirely untrue. It's confusing. So he's taken these pixel memories and changing them and putting those pixels into a larger screen. Now, the other thing that was very confusing is I mentioned on page 250, you have two pictures of Babe Ruth. First picture is as clear as day, and they did something like this. They have a little magnification box, and then they press the button, and whammo, that box suddenly became bigger, right? It was magnified after the fact. And they pixelated the living daylights out of this picture. They did that, it's kind of this is what happens, right? If you zoom up too close, you start to see the pixelation. And then they have the nerve to say, you don't lose any resolution. Well, clearly on those two pictures, you lose resolution. However, you don't really lose resolution. Don't forget those pictures there, because you're taking what's already there and just simply making it bigger. So the resolution actually is going to stay the same. And whereas on the other hand, so that's read magnification. That's after everything's been saved. Now, if you want to magnify before, then you take your screen once again, maybe you put your little magnification in there, you hit the magnification before you hit freeze. So then we're now putting all of our effort of imaging goes into only the box, the view box, the region of interest box there. And then that becomes the whole screen. Now, that is kind of a different deal. In that situation, the number of pixels or scan lines in the ROI image is greater than that in the ROI's original portion of the original image. You're able to put more into that picture. So it is of the two, it is a better form, and that's right magnification. That is magnifying before you save it. So, you know what? And we're done with that. I still have a hard time explaining it, and I don't want to belabor the point any longer. It's not like it's a huge part. All you really need to know is read and write and all of that. Now on these, I'm gonna do some pausing, perhaps draw some images in and such. But we have some new concepts. Starting on page 253, displays and image processing is the chapter. Well, I guess this is the image processing part. So some of the tricks that these real smart engineers have kind of figured out. And so, well, coded excitation. Let's talk about what we already know about ultrasound. Our ultrasound pulse is short, only a few cycles long. It starts off strong, and by the time you get to the end, it's actually kind of weak. So it's just a few cycles. It starts with a high amplitude and then ends weak. So in fact, it kind of starts with perhaps an amplitude that is pushing our luck as far as bioeffects are concerned. But unfortunately, with such a short sound, a short pulse, once again, balance of good and the bad. We want a short pulse for that axial resolution. The shorter the spatial pulse length, shorter is better in this case. Shorter is better, but shorter is weaker. We go from a very strong pulse in a matter of a microsecond, it becomes a weak pulse and then it's gone. And so there's not a lot of energy going in, which is good. We don't want to hurt people with our ultrasound equipment, but it's also bad because the louder the sound is, the more powerful the sound is, the farther it goes. If I whisper at you, you can't hear me, but if I yell at you, you'll hear me. And it's the same thing here. And so, but you can't yell too loud. You can't take this and just say, well, okay, I want to get even deeper into the body, right? I want even stronger echoes to return. And so then we say, oh, okay, well then let's do the same, we'll use the same pulse, but we'll just put a lot more energy into it. And so then we go, right? More or less like that. And so now that pulse is so much stronger, and boy, we're going to get great. And basically, how'd you do this? You turn the power up, right? Except usually our machines are already set to 100% power, so you can't turn them up anymore. But this is what turning the power button would do to the pulse. It would make it more strong. Unfortunately, there's a limit. There is a limit. Not so much a limit of physics, but a limit to how much the body can handle before you start to cause problems. And here's a little hint, actually. Let's draw this baseline in. That trough is the more important limit. We'll talk about more of this soon enough, but that one's actually more important. You wouldn't think so. You would think it'd be the compression. The compression would be the limiting factor. But a rarefaction pulls the things apart. You don't necessarily want to be pulling tissues apart. They could actually handle the compression better than they can handle the stretching. So, but in either case, if you make your pulse really loud, like literally loud, you make it stronger, it goes farther, we start to get into the problem causing bio effects, bio damage. So let's see, can I fit over here? I think I can. So coded excitation is what we're going to be talking about here. Coded excitation. Now, short is better. And let's see, on the book on page 253, they have a really short pulse. I'll kind of attempt to draw it, but it's like super short. And that's our typical ultrasound pulse. But what if you create a pulse that was longer, not so much, not as abrupt in its strong beginning and weak ending as well? How do we do? Well, I'll tell you how we do that in a second. But so let's take this and let's just take that. We'll call this now the new pulse. Let me get rid of this little yowza. Okay. So nowhere along this pulse have we exceeded the FDA, right? Yeah, it'd be the FDA. Nowhere along this pulse have we exceeded the peak energy. And throughout the entire pulse, trust me, we haven't exceeded the overall energy allowed by the FDA. But we've created a spatial pulse length that's a nightmare. We've gone from a spatial pulse length of that to that. Now, technically speaking, we should be ruining our axial resolution. Axial resolution is 1/2 the spatial pulse length. So if my spatial pulse length is 2 millimeters here, then my axial resolution is equal to 1 millimeter. No. Up to 1 millimeter, because it's 1/2 of the spatial pulse length. But let's see, if that's 2, and then let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, yeah, let's say it's 8, well, let's make it easy, right? 20 millimeters. So, wow, we now have an axial resolution of 10 millimeters. Do you know how bad that axial resolution is? You might as well not even try. It's just, it'll just be one big grayscale gunk of there's very few things that you can see well at 10 millimeters of axial resolution. We've just ruined it. And that's it. Let's just go home. No, of course not. What do we notice about this waveform? It kind of changes frequency perhaps frequencies for sure, perhaps amplitudes too. There are, let's just stick with the frequency. So I have, let's see, a high frequency here, kind of a low frequency for here, and a medium frequency here, and a low frequency, and we're back to a high frequency, and a medium frequency. So we kind of have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of like I have 6 frequencies inside of this pulse. Well, you can call that a code. Now the machine didn't just randomly, accidentally create this code and then forget it, and then forgets about it. No, what the machine did, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do some erasing here. What the machine did is put out a very specific code that it is now going to recognize. It's going to recognize. Let's see, where can I draw this? Didn't leave myself a whole lot of room. Copy V. Now let's bring that down to here. Now we're going to surround it in another. Oh, right. So I'm going to pull this over to here. Ay. There we go. Perhaps I could have picked a different code, but this is what I'm getting to. This is my ultimate reason for drawing this. Let's say that this is our pulse and it's traveling in that direction. It hits something, some kind of barrier, and it bounces back. When it comes back, yes, it's one large spatial pulse length. Not good. But it comes back coded. So now we have, we had going in, we had, let's see, we'll call this one section of a code, and then we'll call that a section, and that a section, and maybe this little piece, and then this whole piece here, and then that. Those are all different parts of the code, almost like a Morse code. Da, 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 da. On the way back, once again, coded, let's see, I'm going to copy that, and then I circled that, and then I said this little piece, and then I added all these together, and all these together, and then I called that one part of the code too. So, that goes in, and comes back out. The same code. And that way, essentially, we can create, if you're a really good engineer, you can create a spatial pulse length, 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 spatial pulse length. So even though the overall spatial pulse length on this is 10 millimeters, by coding it, we've broken it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different smaller codes. The computer is able to recognize that. So even if we have two barriers here, and of course, let's see, we had some of that sound come off of here, and then some of that sound come off of there. Technically speaking, these arrows, as they're coming back, are overlapped. This overlap is from these two arrowheads, one from that wall, one from that wall, and they're overlapped. Not good, right? We don't want that. We want these separate, but they're not separate. Once again, though, they're coded. So in a way, they are separate. Code excitation, sophisticated method of improving. Right. How do we do this? How do we do? Well, first of all, we do it in the pulsar. The pulsar is what controls. It's like the DJ. He's like, so he's doing that, and that's as far as I go as far as being stupid. But so that's creating the pulse. But then you're like, well, wait a minute. The backing material makes us have a short pulse, spatial pulse length. How are we getting a longer pulse? Well, yeah, it's a short pulse length if you hit it with one short voltage. But if you hit it with 6 separate voltages, each one at a slightly different frequency, it doesn't stop ringing because it keeps getting hit. Yeah. As soon as it stops getting hit, within a couple microseconds, it stops ringing. But if you, even though it's only normally a, let's see, 1, 2, 3, we'll just say 3, maybe 4, a 3-cycle pulse on that transducer, if you keep hitting it, now suddenly it's a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now suddenly it's 11-cycle pulse because you won't let it alone. You won't leave it alone. In part, coded excitation was developed within the context of bioeffects. The FDA has established maximum peak intensity levels for sound beams. Intensities created by diagnostic transducers cannot exceed these limits, which impacts large quantities. So this peak intensity here, this guy up here can only be so loud before we violate FDA rules and potentially injure patients. Coded excitation creates very long sound pulses containing a wide range of frequencies. This design pulse distributes energy over a broad frequency range. The coded pulse is strong, but keeps the peak intensity below the FDA limit. So as you can imagine, guys, the overall strength, the overall energy put into the body is greater with coded excitation. I mean, just look at the spatial pulse length. It has to be greater, right? But that peak intensity, that's the dangerous part. We'll explain that soon enough. Just know that peak intensity and especially that peak rarefaction are dangerous. So you don't want to go beyond a certain point there. But by creating a much longer pulse, never exceeding that peak, you can keep it safe for the patient. Coded excitation occurs in the pulsar with codecs with special mathematical techniques. Along with the pulses, high quality coding of the excitation improves resolution. Improves resolution. I don't know how it does that, but it does because that's what it says. Resolution is improved. So coded excitation, higher signal to noise ratio. We talked about that. We did talk about that. We talked about signal to noise ratio. Not specifically though. We've alluded to it. Signal is the sound beam. The noise is all the junk on the machine we don't want. A lot of it's just speckle bouncing around, echoes bouncing around. It could even be electromagnetic noise in the environment, other machines in the environment, and that kind of stuff. Those all contribute to noise. And the best way to get rid of the noise is increase the signal. Because when you increase the signal, the real echoes, the echoes you want to hear or want to see, as it were, hearsay. Anyway, when you increase the power, the ratio of good to ugly mess, all this stuff on the outside, goes up, and so you get a better image overall. It's easier and easier. It becomes easier and easier to ignore the noise when the real signals are powerful. So by being a more powerful signal, this coded excitation, it creates a better overall image, higher signal to noise ratio, improved axial resolution. Okay. And it goes against everything we've learned, right? Spatial pulse length is long, and now we're saying it's improved axial resolution. Well, let's just put it this way. The only way that's possible is that each one of these little spatial pulse lengths has got to be really small. It's got to be better than the original spatial pulse length. It's the only way that's possible. Improved spatial resolution, that's repetitive. If you increase your axial resolution, you increase your spatial resolution. So that's just repetitive. Improved contrast resolution. We'll have to take the book's word for it. I honestly don't know why. Deeper penetration, because it's longer. I can make sure my wife doesn't hear me say that. What? My wife heard me say that. She's pissed. So she's like, "You're gonna get fired." So, oh shit, hit the wrong button. Okay, deeper penetration because it is a stronger signal. Okay. No, now I got to pause again. Erase some of this stuff that I don't have room. Okay, guys. So spatial compounding is the next one. Whoops. Spatial compounding is the next one to talk about. Our machines have that. Oh, it's not called spatial compounding though, is it? What is it called? Maybe just compounding. I can't remember. We'll look at it. We'll look at it when we get back. You guys can find it when I'm gone. And we could see this when you have just gel on the transducer and you're not actually imaging someone. And you can notice an upside down triangle. That's actually spatial compounding. It has 3 levels of compounding on ours. Now, supposedly, well, let me draw this out first. So blue lines indicate a normal scan. And this is what we've been talking about. We have lines of sight, these different beams. Let's see, 3, 6, 7, 8 beams I think I created here. Unrealistically small, but still 8 beams straight down. We could come along and before even processing the image, do a few more beams of sound, except we're going to steer. Let's see, I could steer, I'll steer about that much. And let's make this pretty little arrows. I know I didn't draw these quite so perfect. And then let's see what other pretty color can we use. Let's use dark blue. And we could steer again in the other direction. Oops, I did it again. That's okay. Put nice little arrows here to make sure we all understand where the directions. Okay. Well, that looks like a mess, doesn't it? But what we've done is a little bit of stereoscopic imaging. Stereo meaning like two, like you know, when you have 2 eyes, you see better than when you have 1 eye. Or you know, if you're trying to see something in distance, you might move your head back and forth a little bit to kind of get a little bit of a different perspective. And so what this is doing is getting a slightly different perspective on an object. Let's just put, let's see, a yellow, no, bright red object in here, a star, a really ugly star. The ugly star now is not only being seen from the blue straight down lines, it's being seen from the purple lines, kind of all scanning to the right as far as we're concerned. And then the dark blue scanning to the left. It's being seen now from 3 different directions. This reduces a lot of artifacts. It actually reduces shadowing, which not necessarily a good thing because sometimes a shadow is very useful. See, there's artifacts, there's bad artifacts that are never useful, and then there's artifacts that are useful. And shadows are oftentimes useful. It kind of tells us what something is made of. But in any case, it just can reduce shadowing because, well, now instead of just looking at everything from one direction and creating a dark shadow behind, let's say, a calcification, that shadow is reduced because now we're starting to look from different directions and we're kind of seeing from behind the object, the ugly star in this case. Speckle is reduced. Speckle is, remember, that is caused from countless tiny little interactions, little bouncing of sound waves, and countless interference patterns being created as the echoes are coming back. And by looking at this from different directions, the computer is able to do a little bit better job of recognizing what is speckle noise versus what is real. And so it's able to minimize the amount of speckle. Let's see, the number of frames and steering angle varies depending on the transducer characteristics. In general, more frames in the image. Yeah. So one of the things it says is that we have a reduced frame rate. Why? Well, because instead of the eight original lines of sight, we now have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, another 10 lines of sight. So technically speaking, that really should slow us down. Although I have to say, in our machines, I've done this a number of times and I've never changed the hertz. I've never changed the frame rate. And I'm not sure why that is, but technically speaking, this should change our frame rate, so reduce our temporal resolution. Now, you can see on the image on page 254, the top image, there is a section, an upside down triangle, where spatial compounding is doing its best work. That's because all 3 beam lines are crossing in that triangular space. Off to the sides, there's only 2 beam lines, the original up-down beam line, and then depending on which side you're looking at, either left or right beam line, but not all 3. So that upside down triangle is the best area for imaging. Obviously, we can only do this with phased. What does phased mean again? Timed elements. So obviously our first, we're just going across, phased, in this case, phased and sequenced because we have multiple beam lines. But we're timing it so that it's goes straight down, then we're timing it so that it's right to left, and then timing it again for its left to right. Okay, next one, frequency compounding. It doesn't end. It does not end, guys. These engineers just won't stop inventing stuff. Frequency compounding. My brain is hurting. Okay. Let me pause, quickly read this to remind myself everything. Okay, frequency compounding. When our beam goes in, we know that the pulse, and let's just go back to a regular pulse, and we won't mess with this coded excitation stuff. What is the pulse? Well, it doesn't really look like that. It actually looks a little bit more like, well, actually all of those, let's make them this more or less the same amplitude but different frequencies. You have multiple frequencies inside of a pulse of sound, which means that even though let's say fundamental frequency is 5, we have higher frequencies, lower frequencies, which means the echoes are going to be coming back at higher frequencies and lower frequencies and the fundamental frequencies. So the echoes are going to be a reflection, pun not intended, of what the original sound beam looked like. So most transducers, or traditionally transducers, would just gather up all of those echoes, and just make a picture, you know, whether it's coming back as a 5, a 7, a 3 megahertz. It just makes a picture out of that stuff. But with frequency compounding, what it's able to do is basically separate those out. So let's see, what did I start on? I had a purple and dark. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's about right. So you got that guy coming back. And now let's see, we got a green. That was a little bit shorter. This guy's also coming back. And let's see, my light blue was the longest one. So we'll throw that one down here. So all three of these echoes are coming back. They might be coming back from the same exact object, that my little fabled star. These are all coming back. They could be coming back simultaneously, but in frequency compounding, what the transducer is able to do is, well, not the transducer, I really should say the machine itself is able to recognize that there's 3 different frequencies and process those 3 different frequencies separately rather than processing them all at the same time. It processes the blue or the purple, the blue, the green, and the light blue separately, because each one of those is going to have a slightly different characteristic as far as their echo tendencies happen. And so when they come back and you process them separately, then put them back together and create the image, you can once again reduce speckle, artifact, and noise, because since they're processed differently, when we put them back together, the machine is able to say, okay, real echo, real echo, real echo, fake echo. You're fake news. Fake echo, let's kick it out. And so it's able to kick out what it perceives to be as fake echoes. So it reads in the last paragraph here, it is as if multiple images were created from transducers with different frequencies. The noise components of the reflections are different for each subband, meaning each subfrequency. And when combined, the noise level is reduced. So it's as if, I'll just repeat again with the 3, I said basically that the 3 separate frequencies are processed separately. It's as if you make a picture out of the purple, you make a picture out of the green, and you make a picture out of the light blue. And then you add those pictures together, and that's what you have. That's, in a nutshell, frequency compounding. But they can't end there. No, sirree, they cannot end there. They have to continue on with edge enhancement. Now, I don't know how to show you edge enhancement. Let me pause. I bet I could do this. Okay, you know what? About 60 seconds of work, and I'm kind of proud of this. Edge enhancement. Now, if you look at the picture on page 255, it's actually a very good example. What's amazing is the colors on page 255, figure 15.15. The colors of the dark and the light swirl are identical on the top and bottom half of that screen, or top and bottom half of that picture. There is no difference. If you don't believe me, kind of hold your fingers up and hide some of the detail, and you'll actually see that there is, at least in the middle of the swirls, the color is the same. But it seems so much clearer down at the bottom. Well, if you look very carefully, what they've done is they've taken the light edge, made it a little bit lighter. And then they took the dark edge and made it a little bit darker. If you look at my picture here, I just did a simple little design. And when you look at this side, the edge is a little hard to recognize. It's a little fuzzy. I mean, we could see it obviously, but it's a little fuzzy. Whereas on this side, everything seems so much more clear. There's a real sharp delineation between the two. Now the colors are all the same, except I've made, let's zoom in on this. Where my little arrow is, quite that much. You can see right here, look very carefully. I'm going to get rid of that arrow because it's too distracting. I made the edge of the darker blue just a little bit darker. And then on the outside, I think you probably very clearly see right there that I've made the edge of the lighter blue that comes up to the darker blue. I made the edge just a little bit lighter. And so that creates this illusion of a much more sharper detail. Now, cameras do this all the time. Ultrasound imaging does it all the time as well. Computer identifies and emphasizes sharp edge boundaries. This method works by increasing the image contrast in the area immediately around the edge. That's it. That's all edge enhancement has to offer there. Temporal compounding. Okay, we've kind of talked about this. Temporal compounding. Time compounding, right? I hate you. I hate you because it just keeps going. And the engineers never stop messing with us. So let's see. Let me pause here. Okay, temporal compounding. Not the same thing as spatial compounding. Actually, they're pretty different. Spatial compounding was looking at something from different directions, right? Temporal compounding is a little different here. Okay. Temporal compound, I've spoken to you about this. There's other terms for it is persistence, temporal averaging. I like persistence the most though. And basically what it has is we know that a frame rate, let's say it takes 1/10 of a second. No, let's do better than that. Let's do, well, we have 3 pictures. We'll say 1/30th of a second to create a picture on our screen. Well, you could do a lot with that. That's 30 frames per second. So we could work with that, right? So I create a picture and then it's gone. And then I create another picture and then it's gone. And then I create another picture and it's gone. So essentially picture 1, picture 2, picture 3. So when picture 1 is there and then it's gone and picture 2 is there and it's gone, it's kind of like, it leads for a very fast frame rate, which is good, usually pretty good. But all the information from picture 1 is gone. Now that should be okay. Picture 2 should be picking up where picture 1 left off, and it should be pretty similar. And then when picture 2 is gone, then picture 3 is created. Or frame 3, we could say. Picture or frame, whatever. And it goes on and on and on. Well, if we were able to lay these pictures on top of each other so that, well, let's see. Let's take this guy and look at, oh, I forgot that was like, how did I write the word picture perfectly every time? That's not how it happened. So I got that. And then picture 3. So the word picture stays, but the 1, 2, and 3, they're kind of messed up, haven't they? Well, that's kind of good. That's actually a good analogy. I didn't mean it that way. I should have put some other stuff on the screen to kind of show what this analogy would be. When we're temporal averaging, the computer is going to see the PICTURE and to see that it's persistence. It's persistent while employing persistence. So as one frame is laid on top of another frame, is laid on top of another frame, certain elements inside of that picture are going to be the same every time. But other elements of that picture are not the same. Perhaps they're not the same because they're noise, because they're speckle, noise, speckle, yeah. Is it noise? Is it speckle? Is it something else that shouldn't be there? The computer can now say with certainty that this belongs and this does not belong. So temporal compounding is a good way of, once again, reducing noise, reducing speckle. Let's see, in words from the history from earlier frames, a smoother image with reduced noise, higher signal to noise ratio, and improved image quality is produced. Primary limitation of temporal compounding is frame rate, or at least the perceived frame rate. The frames are actually being created at the correct speed, but we're seeing all these previous information, and it's especially difficult. It can be difficult to watch during a Doppler. So you could do persistence or temporal compounding with a Doppler. In fact, I suggest that you guys do that when we're looking at the bulb. We know that it's difficult to show blood flow inside of the bulb sometimes. It has a tendency to maybe a little bit, you might see some flow in here, around here and stuff. And then of course there's a little bit of reversal, flow, and a little bit of swirling up here, and this part of the bulb and that part of the bulb. But it can be hard to fill the bulb from wall to wall simply because it's hard to get a good Doppler angle on it. It's swirling blood. It's much slower than the CCA or the two vessels leaving the bulb. It's hard to do. But if we use persistence, if we have a frame on top of a frame, on top of a frame, on top of a frame, now we're getting different parts of the cycle, because remember, as the bump is at peak systole versus end diastole, we have different patterns in the color here. And so now perhaps, whoops, seriously, Kurt. Now the blood is coming in, and we're getting a little more of a consistent, maybe a little swirling around here and a little swirl around there. looks weird. Anyway, so now we have blood from wall to wall because we've used the information from, let's see, 4 frames. I especially use it during color Doppler. I don't often use it during grayscale, but it can be used during grayscale as well. Fill in interpolation. Fill in interpolation. The next one does not stop. These guys just keep thinking up new stuff for us to have to learn. So let me create a little transducer here. Okay, it is what it is. It's not what I meant, but here's my transducer. And it's going to be a kind of a vector field. So we'll have all right. So I've mentioned before, when the beams are spreading out like this, it's just simply because that's the way the transducer is designed. The space, let's see, probably this is the best one to show. The space between here, close to the transducer, is different than out here, farther away from the transducer. There's more of a spreading of the sound beam. That's not good. What if you had my star sitting in between there, right there, and you missed the star? Well, if there truly is a little star in between there, and well, we missed it. There's nothing we could do about it. But what the computer can do is say, huh, well, there's a star here, and there's a star there. I'm betting you that there's a star here. And so that's what the machine does. It invents stuff. It just makes it up. It says, I'm taking a bet that there's something there. Now, obviously, we're talking about very small items, very small distances, so it's not stars. I mean, not in a literal sense, and not even in the tiniest sense of a star, of the idea of a star. It's more like if, let's see what color I'll use. If this is echogenic here, let's just say this color blue represents echogenicity, and this is echogenic here, the computer is going to assume, because we're talking about very small spaces, we're not talking about, you know, a centimeter of distance, we're talking about a millimeter at the most here. If that's echogenic and that's echogenic, it's going to make the assumption that whatever it's missing is echogenic too. And so it just makes it up. Fill-in interpolation, two-dimensional levels are created from multiple sector-shaped images, scan lines separated, increasing depth. Gaps or missing data exist between the scan lines, especially as the lines spread apart. Interpolation is a method of constructing new simulated data points to fill in the gaps. The goal of fill-in interpolation is to fill in the gaps of missing data in a way that cannot be detected by the observer, as in you and me. Sophisticated computer programs are able to predict the grayscale levels of the missing data. The program uses known grayscale levels of neighboring pixels to predict the missing information. Fill-in interpolation is a form of pre-processing. The line density increases, improving spatial resolution. For example, fill-in interpolation improves the ability to precisely visualize the border of round structures. The line density increases, does it? The line density seems to increase. It doesn't actually increase. An actual increase in line density would mean that we'd be able to add another line of information and we'd be able to see it, and then we wouldn't call it fill-in interpolation. We'd call it automatic line density increaser mode. That doesn't exist. least I don't think so. I'm sure it will. Trust me, the next version of this book, it will exist. So anyway, and obviously just to beat down a point, if that's hypoechoic and that's hypoechoic, the computer will assume that's hypoechoic. All right. Elastography. Oh my God. All right. Now this one is, this is good. This is good. Although unfortunately, it's, okay, before my wife looks over my shoulder here. Okay. I'll just take it all out. Now, the reason I did have that, elastography was originally used, well, as far as I know, the original use of elastography was for breast ultrasound. Elastic. What do we learn? What do we remember about elastic structures versus inelastic structures? Elastic. Is that kind of like the same thing as saying stiffness or a lack of stiffness? So tissue stiffnessography. Ah, that's ooh, I like that. I've never said that before. That makes perfect sense. Elastography is pretty cool, but I'm going to take a moment to draw this out. Okay, so this is one of those things, one of those times that I'm going to tell you a little bit more than you. And no, you do need to know this. So there's different forms of elastography. What I'm going to draw here is a form where a strong pulse of sound, an FDA-regulated strong pulse of sound is created in the body. And we know from the beginning of the semester that that pulse of sound is not, it's not truly a shear wave like that. It's actually, you know, a longitudinal wave, longitudinal mechanical wave. We know that, right? But shear waves are a thing. They do exist. And in fact, when you create a strong pulse of sound, you can create every time. My pretty blue. You can create actual shear waves in the body. There's going to be a lot of information on this one. So as this strong pulse of ultrasound goes through, and there's different ways of creating these shear waves, but this is one. Strong pulse of ultrasound goes through, it actually creates shear waves. Now the thing about ultrasound, we know that that travels at 154,000. Let's see, what do I want to do? Well, let's do 1540 meters per second. 1540 meters per second. Pretty darn fast. And then the shear waves that are created, they're a little different. They're more like at 10 meters per second. They're standing still compared to the speed of sound. That's the speed of the shear wave. Okay, so this sound wave continues through this tumor and continues on out, and shear waves continue to be created. From that pulse of sound. Now 10 meters per second is pretty slow, but the shear wave, the speed of the shear wave in and of itself is also determined by stiffness of the material. So depending on the tumor, let's say inside the tumor, this is traveling at 12 meters per second. And then when it goes to the outside of the tumor, it's back to 10 meters per second. Whatever. 12 meters per second inside of the tumor, 10 meters per second outside the tumor. That doesn't seem like much, right? But so how is this helping us so far? Well, what the beam of sound is doing, there's a force of what's it called? It's application force. Well, a very forceful single pulse is sent out. The machine's not done, right? It's always working. After that beam is sent out, it's now observing the rest of the tissue in the area. When I say observing, it's sending beam, 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 each beam at 1540 meters per second. And it's watching the patterns of the speckle. Oh, this is so cool. It can actually see patterns of, oh, well, let's see. In a shear wave, any one point is doing this. That could be seen, that pattern of movement can be seen because everything in there, all the tissue in there is either real or speckle or a little bit of both. And that wave could actually be seen because we could see like all the tissue moving along just a little bit. Okay, why do we care? Well, cancer is stiff. Cancer is inelastic. The speed of sound, and also the speed of, what did I just call these? Transverse waves. The speed of transverse waves is faster in cancer and slower in regular tissue. And so the machine is able to understand what's going on. It's able to see this, and it's able to apply a elasticity. Elasticity is the same thing, basically as saying the stiffness of the material. It's able to apply an elasticity grade to the tissue. A lot of times with elasticity, there's a color grade. Sometimes it's all in grayscale. Sometimes there's a color grade. We're used to seeing a color bar on the side, except with elasticity, it could go from a dark purple lighter purple, lighter, maybe what's another color? Let's say blue or light blue. And it could be that on this particular scale, this is stiff, and this is what's non-stiff, soft. So purple being stiff, light blue being soft, and inside of basically what amounts to a color box, let's say we put an area here. It could be the whole screen. It could be just a box. It depends. Now we see, let's see, we said purple. if we see a lot of purples in here and a lot of light blues out here, that's the computer's interpretation of the speed of sound and the speed of the shear wave. Transverse wave and shear waves are, yeah, they're the same thing. That's, I use both terminology, just realized that. But anyway, this is just simply a color-coded interpretation of the speed of sound. Why the speed of sound? Because it changes with stiffness of tissue. Now, I used to do this before machines were any good at doing it automatically, and I would actually have the patient hum. And if they were too embarrassed to hum, and some of them were, I would have them just count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's amazing amount of vibration in our tissues when we speak. And I could see that on the screen. And so it was kind of effective, but nowhere near as effective as today's equipment that does it automatically. There's another way of doing the force. Rather than a powerful beam of sound creating that force, you can hold the transducer in such a way and push it up and down rhythmically, very lightly, but at a certain rate. And the computer will actually give you feedback and tell you whether or not you're doing it right. When you get it to the right point, that too will create those shear waves, and those shear waves can then be studied by the ultrasound beam itself. All right, PACS and DICOM. I'm not going to write anything down for this. Kind of like the end of my last recording, but hopefully I'll end stronger. What is a PACS system? PACS, Picture Archiving and Communication System, describes a digital ultrasound laboratory in which images, well, not only ultrasound, but all of the imaging goes to PACS. X-ray and CT and MR goes to PACS, in which images and additional medical information are digitized and stored on a large computer network. PACS has 3 major advantages. Instant access to studies. Oh my God, when I first started, we did not have instant access. No degradation of data, because why? Because it's digital, it's digital data. Store and forward telemedicine, we can transmit images quite easily, which is also awesome. That's pretty much it. And then DICOM, digital imaging, computers in medicine. DICOM, it's a set of rules and protocols. So if you're going to create your ultrasound machine or your CT machine, and you're going to send it to a PACS, you're going to send that information to a PACS, you can't make up your own language. You got to use DICOM language, and that's basically what this is. When a particular ultrasound system adheres to DICOM standards, the system can successfully connect to a PACS, medical information network. And it certainly helps all the imaging systems work together. Yeah, and then to page 260, you can read on your own. I'm not going to go over that. Okay, guys. Hopefully this all makes sense. And if it doesn't, I'll be back on Tuesday. We'll see you.